Hello, everyone, and Nath, Director, Lead Angels Network, and co-author, Funding Your Startups and Other Nightmares. Moderating the talk is Mr. Punit Modhgil, Founder and Chief Research Officer, Octane Research. I would request all the delegates to please continue posting your questions in the chat box, and our speaker will address a selected few towards the end of the session. I would now request Mr. Modhgil to kindly introduce and welcome our guest speaker. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Aparna. Thank you for the opportunity. And I must say to you, this is the part where I'm very, very anxious and somewhat nervous, and I'll tell you why. Good afternoon, everyone. If you're watching this a little later on a YouTube recording, etc., good day to you. My name is Punit Modhgil, and it's my professional privilege and a personal pleasure to welcome Dr. Dhruv Nath. I have had the pleasure to know him for more than 25 years. Yes, we look very young, but we are not. But it's been a pleasure knowing him. My second job at NIIT, long time back. And I worked with Dr. Dhruv Nath directly, indirectly. And I remember him as one of the most youthful senior executives in that company with a sense of humor, which is unmatched, and always smiling and always available. You know, when you work from, when the company grows from a small young company, which NIIT used to be, and Dr. Nath he joined NIIT in the early stages of the company, so qualifies as a startup that time. I did not, I joined a little later. And the company grew in front of me. I was there for 5 years. Dr. Dhruv Nath was there for almost 19 years, almost 20 years, 18 years actually. And so we have seen, he's seen that growth, and he was always available and always willing to help youngsters like me. I was very young rookie. So despite
You're,
all
you're
these
still a
years,
youngster. You are still a youngster. And
despite
so am I.
absolutely, despite all these years, three things have remained the same for Dr. Dhruv Nath: his sense of humor, his willingness to help and have a positive smile, and his youthful charm and that energy level which drives him. Before I hand over the panel, the dais, the opportunity for him to share his perspectives, I'd like to add that in his professional capacity, after he did his BTech and PhD in computer science from IIT Delhi, he has worked for an IIT where he saw the growth of the company from just an idea to a large company which went public. And later on, he has spent equally number of years with MDI, Management Development Institute in Gurgaon, which has also emerged in the last 20 years from being one of the early private B school educations to now being one of the top 20 in India. And so he's been part of both industry and academia. And more importantly, over the last few years, he's been actively involved with the Angel Network helping startups. He's also a new author, not new as in he has already published 3 books, but I call him new because the most relevant book for our discussion today is this book. There's a mirror image, Funding Your Startup, but in his own unique way. Yeah, there you go. The title also has that blurb which says "and other nightmares." So it's not all a gushy positive story. It's overall very positive, but it also takes you through an amazing journey of not only his perspective and his co-author's perspective, but interview with many names that we now found as poster children for entrepreneurship in India and their perspective. Equally important is his framework called Persistent, and I'll let Doctor talk about that in more detail. But now he's actively involved with angel investment with the ideation and early stage startups. So those are few highlights of what I see his career. He drives a Thar, so young at heart, young in action. And my apologies if I'm not able to do justice to your immense experience and expertise, Dhruv. And at NIT, we used to call each other by a first name. So sometimes I'll call him Dr. Nath, sometimes Doc, and sometimes Dhruv, and sometimes Professor. So it's my
Sometimes
profession.
DN. I was DN,
DN, there you go.
which actually
So
makes me sound like a smuggler.
So with that, let me now hand over this control to you, sir, to take us through your journey. And one of the questions I got from the last session, just before lunch, which I had the pleasure of hosting, was around the funding and how that situation has changed post-COVID. And I know you've talked about this in detail in the book, but it'll be great to hear your perspective. So over to you. And for audiences who are listening in from different platforms, different channels, you have the opportunity to ask us questions. I'll let Professor Nath finish his ideas, etc. session, and then we'll include some of your questions. So please use the chat option if you are on the platform for IMI. If you're seeing this on us on LinkedIn Live or Facebook or other channels where we're going live right now, you can include your question, and one of my co-moderators organizers will pop the question back to me. I'll go through the questions and I'll select a few or one of them at the end of our formal presentation, which is being started now by Professor Nath. So over to you, sir.
Great. Thanks so much, Punit. So like Punit says, sorry, for me, he's not Mr. Modhgil. He's Punit. Old friend. Well, not so old, young friend actually, but we've known each other for many, many years. And he rightly mentioned that, in the last several years, the one thing which I have been doing a lot of is what I would call angel investing, right? Where I've been involved in startups, I've been mentoring them, many successful ones, and also many failed ones, right? And in the process, I've written this book, which Puneet spoke about, right? Funding your startup and other nightmares. And what I will do is, since I was asked to focus on the startup environment, particularly in the COVID scenario, and also talk about funding, I will take you through some of the stories, the kind of stories that we have in the book, and then we will discuss what the implication is for funding and what the implication is in the COVID environment, right? And the title I have used here is um, Startups and COVID. Is it a crisis or is it an opportunity, right? So, by the way, this is the book. So, I don't have to talk about COVID. Everybody knows what the hell it is. And unfortunately, most families, most businesses have been impacted. And if you look at a typical founder, either a guy who's already got a startup or a person who, is planning to start something, what does he look like? Typically, he would look like this, right? And incidentally, not only does he look sad and doleful and dejected, he actually looks a bit like Mickey Mouse, because I would say, wo chua ban gaya, right? So, this is the problem where everybody says, my God, COVID has hit us. What the hell do we do? Mar gaya. If you're a Bengali, you would have said, Sarbonash, more gelo, right? So, this is the problem. However, what I want to focus on today is every time there is a crisis, there is an opportunity, right? And what I want to talk about is the potential opportunity that has come through because of COVID hitting us, right? And I'll take two stories from my own experience. And both of these stories, by the way, are startups which I have personally invested in as an angel investor. So this is a company called Planet Spark, right? Very bright guys, two very bright founders. They used to run learning centers for school kids, kind of automated or semi-automated tuition centers where the child would go to the center and there was a mentor over there or a teacher. There would be a workbook and there would also be some digital content. And in the process, the child would learn. So this was typically after school. Then what happened? COVID happened. So problem is during COVID, kids would not come to the center, right? The parents would, just refuse to send them. So suddenly the business stopped. What did these guys do? They said, okay, no problem. We will, for the moment and maybe for the long term, move to a pure online model where rather than coming to the center and learning, you learn from home and the mentor is now there with you online, right? So they moved to an online model, which I'm sure you would agree with is what most people are doing. Everybody is doing online learning. Okay. However, that's not the point I want to make. The point I want to make is they actually realize something else. They realize that in today's environment, children have lots of time. Therefore, not only do they need to learn curriculum, but they have time to learn other things beyond curriculum. All right. Things like what? Things like painting, dancing, singing, robotics, programming, which may not be taught in school, but these are good things to learn. And potentially, one of these could become your career direction. So what these guys did was, now that they had moved online, they discovered this huge new opportunity, which is extracurricular learning online, right? And today they are probably market leaders. You know, if you look at learning curriculum online, that's a very, very crowded space. You've got Topper, you've got Byju's, you've got all these guys. But in this space, there is probably nobody else, or there are people, but they are small guys. And these guys are growing dramatically, right? So suddenly they took advantage of this opportunity, the disruptive opportunity, which completely disrupted the market. And the opportunity was created by what? By COVID. Okay. And they've grabbed the opportunity. Let me take one more example. And this is again a company that I have invested in. So this is called Phone Per Loan. You know, when you look at banks, when you look at NBFCs, typically they give loans to whom? They give loans to people, middle class people. And these could be large loans. They could be 50,000, could be 1 lakh, could be 5 lakhs. Housing loans would be maybe going into crores. The problem is, the low salaried employees, the drivers, the security guards, the office boys, those guys nobody gives loans to, because the amount of loan is too small to take care of the overhead, and therefore it will not be a profitable business, right? Phone Per Loan had been working in this area, and they used to give loans to such people. So they had partnered with NBFCs. The money came from there. These guys used to do the marketing, the selection of these people to whom loans would be given, and then finally the money would actually be given by the NBFC, right? And normally this would be on the loan, entirely digital. Now what happened? COVID, and therefore the NBFCs ran out of money, right? And as you know, during the COVID crisis, for the first 4 or 5 months at least, there was a huge problem. If by the way, you are an investor in any NBFCs, you would have realized that many of them, the share price in the stock market had dropped dramatically, sometimes as much as 50, 60, 70%. Why? Because the NBFCs were not able to function. And because the NBFCs were not able to function, this company, Phone Per Loan, could not give loans. So their business stopped, right? Now what did they do? Again, look at the opportunity. Look at the smartness of the guy, right? The smartness of the guy is he realized that in this COVID environment, suddenly health has become a major priority and everybody is worried. Boss, agar मेरे को hospital जाना होगा क्या होगा? I may not have the money to afford it, or I may not have the money to afford a good hospital, right? So therefore, health insurance become a very high priority for the same guys, for the security guard, for the drivers, for the nurses, for the lift attendants, for the office peons. They are very, very keen to get health insurance. What he said was, okay, I will. The problem is these guys cannot afford the premium, the health insurance premium. They can't afford it. What I will do is I will talk to insurance companies. Rather than NBFCs, I will now partner with insurance companies, and they are willing, and in fact, two companies were willing to do this. They are willing to sell health insurance on EMIs. EMI based health insurance, these poorer people can afford, not a problem. So suddenly he switched his model from selling Phone Per Loan, which is loans, to selling health insurance on EMIs. And it's a huge opportunity. And potentially, looking at this, a lot of other players can also get into it, right? So it's a disruptive, a very, very large opportunity created by COVID. Okay. So now the fundamental question which I have for you guys is, there are I've only given two examples, but I'm sure you can see many, many more. Who are the companies who can grab these opportunities? Is it companies like ITC, companies like the Tatas, companies like the Birlas? Is it Hindustan Lever? Is it maybe Maruti? Is it, one of these Mahindras? No, they can't. You know why? Because these companies are large, they are slow moving. They cannot suddenly grab an opportunity and launch within 2 months. Who can? The startup can, right? Because the startup is small, the startup can quickly shift and you look at Phone per Loan, look at Planet Spark, whatever they did, they shifted within 1 month, right? Hindustan Lever cannot do that. ITC cannot do that. Mahindras cannot do that. Maruti cannot do that. They have a huge set of factories. How do they change, what the factory is producing from Maruti to maybe something completely different? Okay. So the startup is the one who can grab these opportunities. And believe me, I am an angel investor. I keep meeting lots of these guys. Lots of these smart startups are actually grabbing these opportunities and growing dramatically in this period. Dramatically. So my recommendation to you is please grab this opportunity and grab it fast. Okay. I have one more, a couple of other comments to offer. One is in the book, we have actually described a framework which helps you create a successful startup. It doesn't guarantee it, obviously, but it helps you create a successful startup. And that framework is called persistent, where each letter in this word stands for something that you need to do. So I'll just take you quickly through this because that will help you once you decide to grab one of these opportunities, or if you're already in one of these opportunities. So the first letter P stands for problem, which means you have to be solving a problem for somebody. Otherwise, you're not running a business, right? And Planet Spark very clearly was solving a problem of learning for kids, right? Secondly, you have to have an earnings model. Somebody has to be willing to pay you for solving that problem. And clearly, Planet Spark and Phone per Loan, both of them, obviously had an earnings model because they would charge a fee. Third, size of the market is important. When you're looking at these opportunities, obviously you don't want to stagnate, right? You want to grow dramatically and you want to grow big. So size of the market is huge. And, if you look at Planet Spark, clearly the size of the market is huge because the number of kids who want learning and that to online learning is just phenomenal. Uh, but if the size of the market is crowded, if the market is crowded, then and in the case of Planet Spark, actually the learning market is very crowded because you have Byju's, you have Topper, you have all these guys, the online learning market. Then you identify a subset of that market, which I will call a niche, which is large enough but not crowded, right? And these guys, in their smartness, identified the subset of extracurricular learning, which is not crowded. Very few people in that. And suddenly they're booming, right? So identify a niche. Obviously, you have to have a scalable business because even in that market, you have to have the ability to grow rapidly, right? And any digital business is very highly scalable because you don't need to keep adding manpower to generate more and more revenues. And both the ones I talked about, which is Phone per Loan as well as Planet Spark, are in the digital category, so very highly scalable. Very, very important risk. And every business has risk. And the biggest risk is the risk of your competitor getting into the same market and potentially killing you, right? So you need an entry barrier. Entry barrier is what? This is my business. I have to make sure that I create something within this business so that my competitor is not able to enter and kill me. So it's a barrier for him to enter, right? And if you look at Planet Spark, clearly the entry barrier they have as of now is the huge amount of courses that they have created in the learning as well as in the extracurricular learning space, because anybody else who wants to compete with them will have to first create that large number of courses. And the second entry barrier, obviously, over time is the brand, because parents start trusting it and therefore they are willing to send to get their kids to learn online through Planet Spark. By the way, if you have a very innovative solution, which Planet Spark did have and which Phone per Loan also did have, then that's a very, very good entry barrier. So, for example, if you have a patent or a couple of patents, that's a great entry barrier because legally your competitor is not allowed to copy you. Okay. Two important things. One is the team led by the founder, because we strongly believe even if the business model is not the greatest, the right guy, the right founder will make sure it works. Right? He will keep changing. He'll keep pivoting to make sure it works. Okay. And finally, the proof of everything else is traction, which means you may have the best earnings model, you have taken care of risk, great entry barrier, very high scalability, highly innovative, but the ultimate proof is dhanda aa raha hai ki nahi? Are customers coming to you? Are they paying you? Is that revenue increasing month on month? Is it not increasing, right? So this is the persistent framework, where, as you can see, each letter of the word persistent stands for something: problem, earnings model, risk, and so on. And my suggestion is, when you grab your opportunity, try and evaluate your startup using a framework like this. Okay, probably the last question. Will you get investors? Everybody's worried. COVID times, boss, paisa nahi hai. People don't have money to invest. No, that's not correct. Not correct at all. 20 years ago, you only had a few rich angels, right? Maybe 50, 100. So people like Narayan Murthy, Nandan Nilekani, Ratan Tata, and co. Today, you have a very interesting concept of what I call the Aam Aadmi angel. Incidentally, I must clarify, it has nothing to do with Mr. Kejriwal's party. Nothing at all. I've just used the same terms, right? So the Aam Aadmi angel is what? It's a common man like me. I'm an angel investor. I'm a professor, right? I invest only 5 lakhs. But together, 20 of us can invest 1 crore. Okay. And these guys, there are lots and lots of them. There are probably, it's a guesstimate, but probably about 20, 25,000 Aam Aadmi angels floating around in the country, and lots of NRIs in the US, in Dubai, in Canada, who are very keen to grab the Indian opportunity and invest money here. So the money is there. In fact, the kind of at Lead Angels, we fund startups, and we find, as of today, the amount of money that is willing to fund startups has actually gone up. So COVID has not had any problem. We are actually have a lot of money. So the opportunity is there. The opportunity to create something disruptive has been given to you by COVID. The money is there. My last question: what the hell are you waiting for? Was grab the opportunity. Grab the opportunity and run. Okay. So I think with that I will stop, and I'll probably stop my sharing. Just hold on. Just hold on. I have to figure out. Stop sharing. That's right. Yeah. So it's back to my face and Punit's face once again. Now, Punit, questions. I hope I haven't shot. Professor Una, I don't know when the hell to stop.
No, this time you were a good professor and a good industry wala. So you absolutely did the right thing. You finished all the slides. When I saw 45 slides, I said, boss.
No, most of them are not used.
So thank you so much. So it was very brief and very succinct. So thank you so much. The question that I usually get, and I'm inviting audiences now to pop the question. Aparna, my co-organizer, if you can set us some questions. So yeah, there's a question which says, how would you rate a startup before investment? What exactly would be the red card, which is red flag? How much persistency needs to be shown? Because one of the things you didn't talk about is the acronym is persistent, and a startup guy has to be persistent. Thoda besharam bhi aur thoda persistent bhi, tenacity.
Yeah. Correct.
Which would be a key factor rather than traction. So a couple of questions. Essentially, when you look at a business plan, beautifully crafted, we all have pitch decks. It's becoming more commonplace now. What is that secret formula? How would you say, I'm gonna be the first one to say yes to this proposal? So typically what happens is, an angel community, you'll be few of you looking for deals, and one guy will say, yep, I'm gonna put my 10 lakhs, 15 lakhs, 20 lakhs, 50 lakhs.
Yeah.
That's a typical investment an angel would make in a one particular project. And then the other will say, हाँ चलो करते हैं. So what would be the trigger point for you, sir, which will say, yeah, I'm the first one to say yes? It's like one of those shows where people vote. So if you're an angel investor, when do you say yes?
Yeah. So obviously we look at the persistent model, but I would say a lot of investors look at that without using the same terms, but basically they're looking at the same things, right? However, I will give you the most important thing. At an early stage, angel investors normally invest at a very early stage. At the early stage, you only have a vague idea about the business, and you only have a vague idea about what direction it will take. You have no clue, right? Anything can change, and normally startups pivot several times before they finally get what we call a product market fit, where the market likes what you're offering and therefore is willing to pay. So what we look at, I think most of all, is the founder. Most of all. And I'll tell you the kind of things we look for. One thing I look for, and all of us look for, is passion. If the guy is passionate, then he will be persistent. If he's passionate, he will go on and on and on, boss. In a startup, you have all kind of stumbling blocks. You'll have RBI regulations coming in. 2-3 years ago, Puneet, you'd be aware, we had the silly angel tax coming up, right?
Correct.
I know a lot of founders, they said, boss, मैं अपना धंधा चलाऊं या should I keep answering the income tax office? I mean, that was so silly. However, you have a lot of downs and you have to have the ability to go through. And the only thing that can really take you through all this is passion. Right? So I think passion is one very clear thing we look for. The second thing we look for, very importantly, is we look for the guy's awareness of that business. Now, the business itself, we don't know how well it'll do, but the guy has to have very solid grounding in that business. So if the guy, you ask him questions and he says, no, sir, this I don't know, this, that puts us off, right? So guys who are passionate, guys who are very, very well informed about their business, these are two things we look at. I will give you a couple of things which put us off. And you mentioned the word red flag. Guys who are, I will use the term phadu, फेंकू, मुंह खोलता बोल देता है. We don't like such people. We like grounded guys. We like guys who are honest, down to earth, guys who know their business. What they don't know, they're very clear about. What their weakness is, they're very clear about. They don't try and fudge. Nobody likes founders who try and fool you. Because the moment we see, you must remember, Puneet, pitching to a set of angels, you normally pitch to how many? 30, 40, 50, 100 at one time. One guy, some of them will be in your sector. There'll be enough experts in your sector. You try and fool them and they'll catch you. And that is the end of your presentation. So, couple of red flags and a couple of very strong things that we look for.
Great. So now, pre-corona, everybody was focused on growth, scalability. Anybody would come to you saying, "Sir, मेरा एक POC हो गया है, pilot हो गया है, अब जरा fund चाहिए because I want to really take it to market." Post-corona, the consumer demand is very different. If you're online serving, like the two examples you gave, they had to pivot. So they were looking for they were purely online in a way, or they went online. But what would you say in a situation where demand is not immediate? It may not, unless you're in that sector where you're doing something called digitalization of the existing infra. How would you look at investment proposals differently? Or if I was to say it, how should entrepreneurs reach out to angels differently? Clearly, scale is not the immediate story, or it could be for some sectors.
Okay. So, first of all, I would say investors are smart enough and they realize, look, if there is a demand which is likely to come up in the foreseeable future, maybe 6 months from now, that's okay. That's not a problem. The problem with COVID is that the future is very uncertain. We don't know when it will come, right? I mean, will sufficient vaccines be available in India? Will they work? Will it be 6 months, 1 year, 1.5 years? Nobody knows, right? So the investor normally shies away from uncertainty. Yes, if today you don't have a demand, but you know it's coming up, not a problem. What I must tell you one very interesting thing that investors have actually, in a way, benefited from COVID. I'll tell you why. It's a very interesting thought. If you have a startup which has been badly impacted, right? Its sector has been badly impacted by COVID. There are two kinds of founders. There is one kind of founder who says, "Boss, mar gaya. I will only sit at home and play video games and dekhte hain, we'll see." No investor wants this guy, right? But there are some founders like the two I just mentioned, right? They say, no, we will pivot, we'll change our business model and grab the opportunity, right? And we today, one of the questions we ask founders is, what have you done during the COVID period? If the guy, has gone under or he's just sitting idle waiting for things to, we don't invest in him, right? So I would say, if you are a fighter, even if you haven't got revenues, if you have figured out ways to survive, and obviously the way to survive would vary from startup to startup, it depends on your industry. But if you figured out a way to survive, to an investor like us, that's a very, very positive sign, right?
Thank you so much. We've got
post-COVID.
We've got stop at 2:40. So we've done, and this is a great one because perish versus pivot, and clearly the ones who are ready to pivot will succeed more. We'll continue this conversation perhaps with you, Professor Nath, on the internet, LinkedIn. You've
And
talked
over
about
chai.
your...
Over chai.
So back to you, Aparna, and I'm looking forward to getting my book copy autographed by you when we meet in person. Aparna, over
Great.
to you.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
And
Thank you so much.
thank you so much, Dr. Nath, for being with us today. And of course, thank you, Mr. Modgil, for moderating the session so smoothly. Once again, thank you to both our speakers. Thank you to all our delegates for being with us. Please stay tuned for more such conversations. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye-bye.